Hey, friends. Welcome back to episode number 10 of the show titled right above. Have I told you about this? My name is Brad Kumjanik. I am your host each and every week. This is the show where over the week my mind takes me somewhere, and then I take you on the journey it took me on with whatever subjects those may be. Um, Thank you once again for joining me this week. Always at the top of the show, I'd like to thank everyone who takes the time to like and subscribe. This is a brand new show. I'm brand new to YouTube, and I'm really have been so pleased with the way this show is getting out with little to zero any kind of like marketing or anything like that. You guys have all been word of mouth, and it's been so great. Uh, so thank you again for taking that time. I know it just takes a minute, and you can just hit the like and the subscribe, and you can go on right about your day. And there's no monetization, so you're never going to hear me say, "Oh, join the Patreon," or you could super chat to have your comments seen. I'll never do that. Um, this really isn't about money. This is just kind of a passion show that I do. Give me something to do toward the end of the week. And over the past week, due to the holidays, and I had total nasal reconstruction surgery. So if I sound a little bit different or I have hiccups a lot, I apologize here right at the top of the show. Um, that's what I'm recovering from, but I didn't want to not do a show. So we're going to get the show in here this week. So once again, thank you so much for everyone who's liked and subscribed, pardon me, and commented. Those comments mean so very much to the show. Any kind of way that you can give back to the show, if that's something you're interested in, is that like, subscribe, and comments. It just makes the show easier to find for people when they begin doing searches. All right, enough of the YouTube stuff. So this week, as I was recovering from nasal reconstruction surgery, by the way, don't get nasal reconstruction surgery. I had to do it because I suffer from vertigo, and this was a way to clear out all of my sinuses and cure a deviated septum. And I also had two things called orbital lobes in the back that set in your sinuses below my eyes, and those were getting ready to burst. So all that needed to be fixed. So I had just far too much time on my hands this week to sit around and be thinking about anything but the pain. So my mind took me to a very specific place this week, and I want to take you there first. And then at the end of the show, we're going to go to a totally different subject. Okay. But my mind first took me to Midgar. Are you familiar with where Midgar is? Well, if you know anything about the game Final Fantasy VII, you will know Midgar. I'm more specifically focused this week on Final Fantasy VII. Pardon me, gosh. Pardon me. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. That's the game I was playing right before the Christmas break. I'm just getting ready to complete the game overall. So it was the last big game I had played before Christmas break going into the holidays. Now, I don't know. Maybe it was the pain meds, or maybe it was the quiet stillness of recovery. But something about this game just kept pulling my mind back to it. Not just because it's Final Fantasy. You know, these are great big role-playing game RPGs, right? I guess JRPG because it's made in Japan. But Final Fantasy is such a beloved franchise here in North America as well. And ever since Final Fantasy VII, the game that this was based on, that series has really taken off. It was getting popular before then, but 7 really took it into an entirely different stratosphere. You know, this game's awesome, not just because it's Final Fantasy, and not because it's gorgeous, or also not because it's a huge game with, well over 100 hours of gameplay, but because It's one of those rare experiences that dares to revisit a story that we thought we already knew and we'd already played. And then it asks us to look again. See, Rebirth isn't just a remake, it's a conversation with the past. See, it's a challenge to your memory, to fate, and to identity. It takes one of the most beloved games of all time and says this: what if the story you remember isn't the only version that matters? And that alone makes it worth talking about. So today, as I always try to do, we're going to deep dive into it. We're going to explore everything that's changed from the original Final Fantasy VII. The story shifts, the character arcs that are both maybe new or changed. And of course, new emotional layers that are within the story. To me, this is one of the finest stories in a JRPG ever, period. And yeah, there's some nonsense in there, but there's nonsense in every story. So what we're going to do is we're going to break down the combat systems, the magic, the materia, the synergy mechanics as well. We're going to talk about the mini games, the tons of secrets that are here, and the Easter eggs. And yes, we are going all in on the included card game, Queen's Blood. That card game has become my new obsession. Square, if you're listening, and I know you're not, please make a standalone game just for Queen's Blood. And no, I don't mean like a board game. I mean, give me a video game for Queen's Blood. Expand on it in every way that you can. Add in all the characters from all of the different, all of the different Final Fantasy games and all the other characters and things that are within there, all the different magic systems. You'll have a game that just prints money. Okay. And as I mentioned then, at the very end of the episode, I'm going to switch gears totally because something happened over this week that I have to talk about. It's been 10 years in the making. It's what they're calling the end of Stranger Things. I was there for every single episode of Stranger Things, and I absolutely have to discuss this finale. It's all I've wanted to talk about since my recovery began. I'll talk about what it meant to me, what I think it got right, what it actually left us with, and why the finale hit so many of us square in the chest. So, my friends, settle in. Whether you're a longtime Final Fantasy fan, or you're someone who just loves great storytelling or an amazing video game, maybe you're just here for the ride. This one is going to be a fun one. Probably my best show to date. So, let's begin. Have I told you about this? Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and Stranger Things The End? Maybe? Let's begin with Final Fantasy VII. What is Rebirth? And how does it differ from the actual original Final Fantasy VII? Well, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth covers roughly what's called the KALM, K-A-L-M flashback through the end of the forgotten capital portion of the original Final Fantasy VII game. But please know this, it's not a one-for-one retelling. It's an alternate timeline. It's a meta-aware reimagining that assumes Remake already broke Destiny. And Remake was the first game in this trilogy of games that they're making to remake Final Fantasy VII. So the one before this already kind of broke Destiny, and now the story is exploring what happens when fate itself becomes unstable. So, major differences from the original game. Again, this is a reinterpretation, not a remake. Remake already introduced the Whispers and the idea that the party is defying fate. Rebirth continues this. Many events line up with the original, such as Junon, Costa del Sol, and the Gold Saucer. But the meaning and the outcomes of those things shift, especially near the end. Then we have Zack Fair's expanded role. In the original, Zack is mostly just backstory, but in Rebirth, he exists in an alternate timeline that keeps brushing against the main one. And his survival or presence becomes a major thematic and plot device instead of just a simple footnote. And then there's Aerith and the nature of her fate. The game leans hard into Aerith's awareness of possible futures, including her own death. Instead of a blind tragedy, her arc becomes about choosing how to live, knowing what could possibly happen to you, which is a major shift from the 1997 original framing. Next up, we have Yuffie's integration. In the original, Yuffie was optional. In Rebirth, she's fully canon from the start, integrated into the core storyline and party dynamics, building on her Integrate DLC appearance. This time we have open regions and side content. The structure is radically different. Large, semi-open regions that have tons and tons of side quests called odd jobs are all strewn throughout the world. There's world intel that you have to go grab this time. Tons of mini games and optional bosses instead of the original's more linear overworld. This game was built with the chef's kiss in this way. This open region and all the side content it finally makes it so you can play Final Fantasy VII the way you want to. You want to jump in and just do some side quests and then jump out? Go do it. You want to just jump in and play a game of Queen's Blood? Go do it. Want to delve into the story for the entire weekend? Go do it. Play however you want. Now, there's also combat and synergy system changes. Rebirth massively expands combat with synergy skills and abilities. You have revamped weapon upgrades and folios, making it very different and giving it a completely different feel from the active time battle plus menu-driven original and even remake. It's different from it as well. Now, story changes and twists are all over the place, and this is going to be spoiler heavy. So I want you to know that going into it. If you're not pretty much all the way through Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, there's going to be spoilers ahead, so you've been warned. Some of the most notable story changes based on comparisons across multiple reviewers are as follows. First, you have the reframing of Nibelheim and Cloud's memory. The Calm flashback still covers Sephiroth's mission to Nibelheim, but Rebirth leans more heavily into Cloud's unreliable memory, layering hints that his recollections are being manipulated by someone, or maybe even overwritten. Sephiroth appears way more often, intruding on scenes and blurring reality in a way that just was not possible back in 1997. Zack's timeline segments as well. Entire segments show Zack in a world where he survived his original fate. He interacts with Aerith's mother and others. These just aren't flashbacks. They're treated as parallel reality slices, suggesting that multiple coexisting timelines exist rather than just this single altered past that we've seen before. This radically changes the story, and I believe 100% for the better. Then, as I mentioned, you have Aerith's awareness. Aerith experiences déjà vu and premonitions more explicitly. She hints she knows what's supposed to happen and wrestles with that eventual outcome. In Rebirth's later chapters, though, her choices and conversations with Cloud are colored by this meta-awareness in ways they never were before. Then you have the whispers or fate toned down but still present. These are less in your face than in remake, but the idea that destiny is a force, sometimes being defied, sometimes reasserting itself, still shapes events, especially toward the story's conclusion. There are expanded character arcs for so many people. Barrett gets more focus on his guilt and leadership and his role as a father. I mean, they hammer that one in the ground. Tifa's emotional tension with Cloud is foregrounded a lot more, especially around who Cloud really is. Even Red gets more agency and development earlier than he did in the original. And Kate Sith isn't just a comedic spy. He's woven right into Shinra intrigue and the emotional stakes way sooner. And that's just to name a few. We even have new or remixed events and bosses. You get entirely new story beats and characters and boss encounters that keep appearing throughout the game. Original fans are going to recognize these locations, but you're going to encounter them in different orders and even different contexts, which make them feel new. Not to mention the new graphics and gameplay. The main characters have deeper backgrounds, and Rebirth gives them way more attention, right? I'll just keep to the core party as they appear in Rebirth. We'll start with Cloud. His original background was he was an ex-soldier, first class, or at least that's what he believed he was. And now he's a mercenary hired by Avalanche. This was in the original game. He was traumatized with fragmented memories surrounding Nibelheim, Sephiroth, and his past with Tifa. How does that change in Rebirth? Well, his unreliable memory is right front and center now. Sephiroth actively invades his perception many, many times, sometimes during normal just exploration, turning the narrative into a psychological struggle as much as a physical one. Cloud's stoicism cracks more often, way, way, way more often, revealing his vulnerability when faced with visions of alternate realities and, of course, Aerith's possible fate. Let's talk a little bit about Aerith. And her last name is Gainsborough. In the original, she was the last of the Cetra, raised by Elmira. She holds the key to the planet's voice through the life stream. Her death was the emotional, pivotal moment of the original game. What about in Rebirth? Well, here comes the spoilers. Aerith is portrayed as someone who can see probabilities and possible futures. She flirts and jokes and smiles, but Rebirth emphasizes the weight of what she knows. And that's a weight that only she can carry. Her interactions with Cloud and others often carry double meanings now. There's what she says, and then there's what she's not saying because she's trying to protect them from a knowledge of this new destiny. It's quite a different role for Aerith in Rebirth. Then you have Tifa Lockhart. In the original game, Cloud's childhood friend from Nibelheim is who she was. She's a martial artist and a key member of Avalanche. She carries guilt over not confronting Cloud's false memories much sooner. But in Rebirth, Tifa's internal conflict about who Cloud actually is and what she remembers versus what he remembers is highlighted with way more nuance. Her arc revolves around trusting Cloud while also fearing what the truth might be. And you see way, way more of Tifa's leadership, her emotional intelligence, and her quiet pain in moments when the group's bond is tested. Pardon me, one moment, we'll get a drink. Keep hydrated after surgery. All right, let's talk about Barrett Wallace. In the original, he was the leader of the Midgar cell of Avalanche. He lost his hometown, Corel, blamed Shinra for it, and is raising his adopted daughter, Marlene. But in Rebirth, the expanded world allows more time with Barrett as both father and leader. Trust me, his being a father, that's going to be driven home every chance you get. And it's not a bad thing. His righteous anger is balanced with his fear of failing the people that he loves. That truly is Barrett's biggest fear. He simply fears letting down everyone around him, and more importantly, his daughter. He has tons of new scenes and side content, which deepen the themes of environmental guilt, radicalization, and redemption. Then you have Red 13, Nanaki. In the original, his background was he was a highly intelligent lion-like creature from Cosmo Canyon. He was used as an experiment by Shinra. He acts as a philosophical anchor in the original, especially around the planet and the life stream. In Rebirth, he's playable and he gains more spotlight. His loyalty, curiosity, and conflict about his own role as a specimen and as an heir and as a guardian of the planet are explored across side quests and party interactions. His presence brings a mythic, spiritual tone to even mundane events. And he just looks so damn cool. He's great to have around in your party. And then there's Yuffie. Yuffie Kizaragi. I believe that's how you pronounce her last name. In the original, she was an optional party member, a Wutai ninja who steals materia, mostly comedic in the 1997 game. In Rebirth, though, thanks to both Integrate and now Rebirth, she's fully integrated as a main cast member. She's still energetic and brash, but that Wutai heritage and her sense of isolation and her desire to prove herself make her much more well-grounded and rounded out, and make her more than just simple comic relief like she was in the original. Then you have Kate Sith. Originally a fortune-telling robotic cat riding a big Moogle, secretly controlled by Reeve from Shinra's executive board. But here in Rebirth, he's introduced earlier and more meaningfully. His role as a corporate insider torn between Shinra and his conscience is way more textured. And his comic exterior hides some very real stakes. His connection to Shinra becomes relevant to the party's strategic choices way, way more than the original. And then we have Vincent and Sid. Without going too spoiler heavy on future parts, their roles are kind of being set up to be more integrated and emotionally resonant once they fully join in the later installments. Rebirth focuses just on deepening the existing playable cast. So we won't go any more into Vincent or Sid. Let's discuss the combat system, and that includes magic materia. So Rebirth builds on Remake's real-time active time battle hybrid, but it adds a few layers. You do have real-time action. You move, you dodge, you guard, and you basic attack in real time. So no more turn-based. You move around and you attack. There is an ATB gauge. Pardon me. Your actions gradually fill up the ATB segments as you move and do your basic movements. But then you can spend ATB points that let you use abilities and spells and items from the command menu. There's also party switching. You can control any active party member at will. Okay. The AI handles the rest, but optional play involves active switching. If you're going to play this game and you're going to do well at it, get used to switching characters. Mainly because if you just play one, you're going to die. You're going to need the other characters. Then there's the stagger system. Enemies have a pressured state and a staggered state gauge. Using the right element, ability will fill the gauge. Then staggering massively increases further damage you do after the stagger. So battles revolve around finding and exploiting a character's weakness. For example, maybe a character that you're battling, if you use the assess power on them, you might find out they're weak to lightning. So when you begin to use lightning attacks, you will stagger them. They will lose their turn for a bit, And any damage you do to them after that, whether it's lightning or not, will have increased power behind it. But of course, you still want to keep using the weakness, the element that they're weaker to, because that will certainly help you out as you move along. Now let's talk about the synergy skills and synergy abilities. As far as synergy skills go, they're free. They're context-sensitive abilities that involve two party members acting together. In other words, Cloud and Tifa performing a coordinated maneuver. These don't cost ATB, but they often require specific conditions or follow-ups, so you'll want to be reading the screens closely. They can generate ATB. They can close distances on long-range characters, and particularly, they set up staggers like nothing else. Those were synergy skills. Now let's talk about synergy abilities. These are powerful tag team moves unlocked via what are called folios. Those are skill trees assessed at vending machines or bookshops. Okay, that's how you access them. They require both characters' synergy gauges to be sufficiently filled, and that you charge them by spending ATB with those characters. Compared to, I would say they're comparable to mini limit breaks or super abilities, and they're best used at key stagger windows. This is the best way to stagger your opponent. This system pushes us players to think less about solo performance and more about how the party's relationships and pairing strategies work in our favor. This is a much deeper combat system than anything you've ever seen in Final Fantasy. Now, folios and weapon upgrades. The weapon system has been reworked. Instead of Remake's globe-like upgrade grid, Rebirth has you unlock weapon skills as weapon levels increase. You can equip up to 4 of these at a time, and you can customize each weapon uniquely, which is very, very cool. For folios, each character has a folio skill tree where you spend SP to unlock them. You get stat boosts, passive skills, and synergy skills and abilities. Now, as far as materia and the magic system, materia works similarly to Remake, but it has a little bit more breadth and options. As far as types of materia, you have magic materia, which is green. For spells like fire, ice, thunder, cure, barrier, etc. You have command materia, which is yellow. These are new commands like steal and assess. You have support materia, which is blue, and that modifies linked materia like elemental or magnify. Then there's summon materia, the red materia. It summons powerful entities like Ifrit and Shiva. And then there is complete independent materia, which is purple. And it just kind of gives you passive boosts and special effects. Magic materia specifiers grant spells at different levels as materia gains AP. In other words, think about it like Pokemon evolution. You start with fire, and that turns into Fira, Fira, and that turns into Firaga as you level it up. So starts with basic fire and then gets way more powerful after that. It does consume MP or magic points to cast. They can also be linked with support materia in equipment slots to enhance or alter effects. In other words, you can put elemental plus fire in a weapon, and now you'll have fire elemental attacks in the weapon. There is materia progression in Rebirth. There are more varieties of that than there are in Remake, and that totally broadens the build abilities you have in your party. Both offensive, defensive, and support possibilities expand significantly. Magic choices matter as well. Some enemies have very specific elemental or status weaknesses that define the fight. If you have someone that's, let's say, weak to fire, and you keep like throwing lightning at them, thinking, oh, lightning kills everything, think again. You will lose that fight. That's why the assess skill is huge. You should be using that on every time you see a new enemy, and then either writing it down or remembering what that enemy's weakness is. Okay, now let's move into mini games. And really what just makes them interesting, right? Rebirth is stacked with mini games, more than almost any Final Fantasy game to date. So we're going to talk about a few of them. First off, Queen's Blood card game. I'm going to go into that in much, much more detail, but just know this is a fully fleshed out collectible card game with deck building. It even has side quests and rankings. It's arguably the Gwent of Rebirth if you played Witcher, and it's easily worth its own game, period. And you'll see as we get there. There's a piano mini game. This is a rhythm game and a free play piano system where you can play actual pieces of music from Final Fantasy games on in-world pianos. Multiple pianos are scattered around the world. Each region has its own instrument and sheet music to discover. As far as sheet music, you want to collect sheet music because that unlocks new songs you can perform. Achieving high ranks on performances yields rewards and contributes to completion trophies. And then there's mechanics. The rhythm prompts similar to other rhythm games. Advanced players can free play for fun as well. Then there are Chocobo related mini games. Just in case you don't remember Chocobo, they're the big yellowish birds that you ride around in the game world. There are Chocobo Racing. That's been updated and expanded at Gold Saucer races with handling, obstacles, and customization. There's also Chocobo tracking and taming. It's a little bit like Chocobo Pokemon. It's region-based Pokemon side activities that'll tie into the exploration and fast travel. Now, if you were aware of Golden Saucer and what it was in the past, uh, think about it like Dave and Buster's for Final Fantasy. It's loaded with activities. Rebirth reimagines them with modern graphics and mechanics. There's an actual 3D brawler arena style event you can play. Fort Condor style strategy play. Shooting galleries, Wild West style rail shooting homages, and other arcade like experiences that revisit or even remix the original Final Fantasy VII amusements. But that's not all. You can read about in various guides that are out there. There are combat simulators, there are advanced VR style battles that have special rules. There are racing and chases, either on foot or vehicular sequences that are built as replayable challenges. Also, you can collect anything and everything in the game, it seems. There's scanning, tracking, intelligence gathering, music gathering from just you name it. And there are also other rhythm segments outside of the piano that are performance related events and story scenes. See, Rebirth uses mini games not just as distractions, but as a way to show different sides of the character. Like Tifa excels at the piano. Cloud interacts with people at the Gold Saucer way better than other people. And to embody the theme park of memory vibe of revisiting a beloved classic. Now, let's dive deep into Queen's Blood. Queen's Blood is deep enough that, again, it could certainly be its own game. It has a core board and an objective to it. So the board is a 3 rows, a 5-column grid, and you and your opponent set on opposite sides. The objective is at the end of the match, the player with the highest total points across all 3 rows, not necessarily who won the most rows, wins. And you have a deck. Each player brings a deck of 15 cards. Cards have a cost between 1 and 3 charges to play. There are placement patterns, which board tiles that they actually activate when you lay them down. They have attack values and point values, and sometimes special abilities and effects. You begin with access only to the first column on your side of the board. Each card costs charges, and the charge resource slowly builds as the match progresses. Cards have a pattern of influence. When placed, they actually expand control into the adjacent tiles, unlocking new spots for you to be able to put subsequent cards, often pushing farther into neutral or enemy territory. So each row contributes points in the row where it's played. And at match end, each row is then tallied up. The person who has the most points in that row gets the points they've accumulated. So if I accumulate 10 in a row and you accumulate 4, I win the row, I get 10 points, you get nothing. And then the final result is the sum of the rows that you won. It's possible to win 2 low scoring rows, I should say, and still lose if the opponent concentrated massive points into the third row. So you have to be thinking lane value instead of lane count. That's where a lot of people go wrong. They think, well, if I win 2 out of 3 rows, I'm automatically going to win. That's not true. Now, the card abilities include things like buff and debuff. They increase your points in a lane and reduce the enemies. There's summon effects, which can alter patterns and open up new tiles. And then there's special triggers. These are effects when placed next to a certain card type or when certain conditions are met. Now, building decks often revolves around synergies like any collectible card game is. Magic the Gathering, Lorcana, it's the same thing. You figure out which cards work with the other cards in the best way. I would point you to your friend on this Google and just say, give it the good type in or Chat GPT, whichever AI you like to use, Copilot, and just say, give me an example of a deck of Queen's Blood, a Queen's Blood card deck that plays well, and it will show you which cards you should be trying to acquire. You're going to acquire cards in many different ways in this game. Sometimes you have to go through the story, the different story pieces that are there to further the story along. And in that, you might get cards. You might win cards from enemies. You might find them out in the world. You might play other people in the world. And when you do, they'll give you a card. There's tons of ways to get the best cards, or you can buy them from vendors. So a great beginning strategy tip would be master space over power. You need to focus early on expanding your accessible tiles, not just dropping high value cards. This is where I went wrong in the beginning. I was trying to play my 4s right away, thinking, well, I'm already going to put 4 points into a row. But then the other guy starts expanding, and then I can get no more than maybe 6 points in the row. And by the time he's expanded, he's already up to 12, 13, 14 points. So you want to focus on getting more space over the higher value cards in the very beginning. You also want to balance your curve. In other words, the cost of the cards. A deck full of 3 cost monsters will leave you unable to play early on in the game because you only get 1 charge to begin with on turn 1, 2 charges on turn 2. So you couldn't even play a card until turn 3 if all you had were 3 cost cards. So you want to aim for a mix so you always have playable options, particularly at the beginning turn. You also want to try to control the center lane. The middle lane becomes the battleground. Securing that central tile, those central tiles, I should say, gives flexibility to pivot out to either of the other lanes as you need to gain more territory. You also want to play for in-game lane value, not early dominance. A lane that looks lost early can be swung later with a high-impact card. Don't overcommit to a lane you're already winning by a large margin. Shift resources where they're needed. If I'm up 14-2 in a lane, there's no sense to play any more cards there unless it looks like I've left the person way too much territory in the lane. Instead, move your valued cards over to the other 2 lanes where you can begin to accumulate more power in those lanes. You also want to finally read the opponent's pattern. Many opponents telegraph their plan by where they begin to expand early. So, for instance, if they commit heavily to a single row, what you consider is contesting that row with efficient cards, or sacrifice a row and move on, uh, winning the other two with higher values. So again, if you see somebody just pouring all their money into that center row, thinking, I'm going to get the center row, I'm going to get the center row, then you start feeding into the outer two just to make sure they're not able to just sweep the board from you. You also want to look at cards that have effects on them and be playing those. You might be saying, well, those are maybe 1 or 2 power, and I can get a 4 power card that has no effect, right? But those effects are what are cause the synergies between the cards to work. So always, again, remember, cards that can adjust other cards' points, or open up tiles, or break up enemy formations, they can create your huge swings in the game. I can tell you this from experience, a single well-placed effect card often outvalues a big static card. And also, you should always be looking to upgrade your deck as you travel. You should always be checking shops and rewards for new cards. And also, don't just keep every card you have. Replace weak, inflexible cards with ones that support your preferred playstyle. Those can be control type playstyles, or aggressive type playstyles, or combos. Okay, now that's the end of that. I could say so much more on Queen's Blood because it's such a huge flipping game. It has so many different cards and options and everything. Sometimes I have literally had play sessions of 5 hours where that's all I did. And I know that sounds crazy. This is a huge RPG. I could have been moving the story along, but I love this game. I also happen to love Magic, and I love Lorcana, so you can see why this game is a big eye catcher for me. Well, let's talk about other tips, tricks, secrets, and Easter eggs just within the game. There are tons of exploration rewards. Throughout exploration of each region's intel, side quests, and environmental puzzles, you're going to get powerful materia that you can only get by doing those things, powerful weapons, and powerful gear. And you're going to get it earlier than you get them just by following the main story. So remember, do the side quests. I know I too want to just push the story along when I first start playing these games. But then, like typically, particularly like in Assassin's Creed games, I start looking at my map and going, I need to clear these things out. And then when I do, I'm always happy I did, because I find better weapons, cooler things, more materia I can put into the slots of my weapons and things. Also, let's talk about Chadley for just a minute. Chadley is a robot guy that you find who's basically, his whole thing is he wants to find out as much about this region of the world as he can. He wants to gather all the intel. So he's going to send you on these quests to find these towers that you have to beat. Like, I don't want to call them bosses, but there's typically a pretty hard monsters around them, and then you can climb up the tower. And then it does like Assassin's Creed, where it shows you different things that are around in the different areas. This is the way that you unlock a lot of the side quests in the game, so you want to be doing them. If you complete region intel quests, that unlocks new materia and combat simulator challenges, some of which will grant the highest tier materia and accessories that make some boss fights even trivial at the power of the equipment that you're getting. Again, the piano locations and the sheet music are subtle nods to classic Final Fantasy VII tracks. Completing them all is more really a nostalgia tour as it is a mechanics challenge. It's kind of just something fun to do. But when you hear some classic tunes that you love, you'll begin paying a lot more attention to the sheet music. Oh, there's quite a few dialogue variations and relationship moments, far more than I could go into, but talking to party members in certain places or after major story beats unlocks optional scenes, many of which hint at relationship routes or emotional undercurrents that you can take to change the game. Again, there's just too many specific Easter eggs to list, but just know that this is a game that rewards exploration, and you should look in every nook and cranny. Open every drawer. You're going to be surprised what you find. Now, I know what you're saying. My gosh, you went on and on and on about this for almost 45 minutes. How long is this game? Well, if you just did the main story, if all you did was trudge through the main story, it's estimated to be a 30 to 50-hour game, depending upon the difficulty level you choose. How Long to Beat website says it's typically around 48.5 hours for the average person at medium difficulty. Now, if you did main story and most of the optional side content, you're looking at 100 plus hours. One user tracked 170 hours for doing every minigame, challenge, intel, and trophy related task. This isn't just a game, it's a long term relationship with a story that refuses to end the way that you remember it. See, Final Fantasy VII for me was my first big Japanese RPG. And I can even remember at the same time I was playing this game, I was collecting comics. So I would go to a comic book shop every Wednesday when new comics were released. And I remember one time the guy working behind the counter was getting my comics from my pull list. And he said, "Hey, didn't I hear you talking in here a week or two ago that you were playing this something Fantasy 7 game?" And I said, "Oh yeah, Final Fantasy 7." He said, "Well, you may be interested in these." And he turned around behind him and he pulled off two like medium sized action figure boxes that were all white. And he put them in front of me. He goes, "These came from Japan." He goes, "I will never sell these things." He said, "If you want them, just take them." I was shocked, absolutely shocked. And I'm like, "Look, I can't take them. That wouldn't be right." I said, "But let me take a look at them." And I said, "You open them at least." So he went ahead and carefully removed the tape from the outside. And they were little white boxes. And he pulled the top off of the first one. And the character was about a 4.5 inch character. And it was Cloud. And he had the spiky yellow hair. And he had the big sword that was on his back. And his arm was behind his head that would hold the sword. And I about lost it when I saw it. I was like, "Oh my gosh, yes, I have to have these." And then as he was fiddling around with the box, I happened to look on the bottom of it, and the price for each one of these was $80. And these things had articulation through the roof. You could take heads off and put other heads on. You could put new arm pieces on, new gear. They came with everything. And he was literally trying to give these to me. What a friend. What a great guy. I will never forget Bob. I won't. In that comic book shop. I used to love, love, love Wednesdays. Going to lunch with my friends and then heading over to the comic book shop and picking up all the new things. The Spider-Mans, the X-Men's, you name it. All, Superman, Batman, all of them. Whatever was catching our eye at the time. Image Comics was new. I'll do a whole episode here on comics as well in the future, because it's another passion of mine. I don't collect anymore. I just basically read them on the app because who has space anymore for things to collect? And I just remember looking at Bob and saying, "Bob, that's like $80 a piece. You've got to let me pay you." Bob said, "You know what? Come in here every week. Since I've opened the place, you've been a solid customer." He goes, "There's few people like you." He said, "So just think about picking up a few more comics over the next few weeks. And you can bet I did just that to pay Bob back." I can remember proudly bringing those action figures home and displaying them right up above my TV that I was playing Final Fantasy on. And it just made the game that much better. The other character was Barrett with his big gun arm, and they looked exactly like they did in the game. It was a beautiful reminder of the game itself, how awesome that game was, even back then, how deep the story was, even though the graphics weren't that great back on the PS1 at all. But through today's modern technology, you can still play Final Fantasy VII and updated remakes. And then, of course, now you can play them on the PS5 and PC. And I'm telling you, I know I could have finished Rebirth by now, as many hours as I put into it, but there's just too much awesome content there, and I don't want to move the story along. I don't want it to end. I almost want part 3 to be out before I'm done with 2, so that I can feel good about finishing it, knowing I can hop right back into this awesome world that they've built. The world is gorgeous. The gameplay fantastic. The story is one you'll actually read and care about, as well as the characters. And there are so many systems in the game to keep track of that it's a game that just keeps on giving. Even after you finish it, I guarantee you'll want to go back and play it some more because you're just sure there's a materia you didn't get or a new piece of weaponry or armor that you have to continue to finish and play the game. So, friends, that's my assessment and where my mind took me this week on Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Won't you hit me up in the comments and let me know? Have you played the original Final Fantasy VII in its many iterations? I know some people who even played it on like the PSP, Sony PSP handheld. I know people who played it on the Switch. I'd love to hear what you think of the game and who are your favorite characters. Does Yuffie bother you as much as it seemed to bother so many people when she was just comic, there for comic relief in the original game, versus now where she's a very integral character in the party? Do you like all of the battles, or how battles have changed from uh, being turn based to where you take a turn, they take a turn, then you take a turn, they take a turn, you pick what you're doing. Versus nowadays, you just go up and start swinging your sword. You're gonna start tearing into stuff right away. You can still do the awesome summons. We didn't even talk about the summons much, but the graphics for the summons these days are jaw dropping. They're just amazing. It's just a game you can play over and over and over again. It just keeps on giving. It just keeps getting richer, and I can't wait for the third uh, version episode, I should say, to be released. Hopefully, sometime this year. We'll see. But again, do me a favor. Go down in the comments and let me know who are your favorite characters. What's your favorite part of the story? Are you enjoying the remakes as much as the original? And please, 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 if you have any tips on Queen's Blood, drop them in the comments for me. Oh my gosh, you would be doing me such a help. There are so many characters in this game, I can't come close to even touching. I've lost whole rows with 0 points, so I could definitely use your help in that aspect of the game. I love Queen's Blood. I'd love to hear how you're doing in that part of the game. All right. Well, now let's go on to our final um, topic of conversation that we have here, and that is Stranger Things. The end? You see, for me, and I'm only gonna this is just me, okay? One guy who's been dying to talk about this and couldn't because I haven't been able to get to everybody. Everybody's on vacation and they don't come back until, coming up maybe, let's see, tomorrow's the 5th. So people will be back again into work tomorrow. So I can finally begin to talk to like someone about it. But Stranger Things 5 delivered a powerful, emotionally charged finale that did tie up most major arcs while leaving us fans with lingering questions and one haunting cliffhanger. And that cliffhanger is this: what's the real fate of 11? The ending was divisive, but it was widely praised for its ambition. It had impressively strong viewership numbers, and it even got a modest theatrical box office run. So, what I want to talk about just very quickly, this won't be a long segment, I promise, is what it answered and what it didn't for me. So, let's start with what I believe was answered. Well, Vecna's fate. See, after years and years of build-up, Vecna, or Henry Creel, was finally defeated. The climactic battle was one that I think is up for discussion, right? Why is it up for discussion? Well, it saw Joyce Byers, Will's mom, deliver the final blow. It was axe strike after axe strike after axe strike to his neck to decapitate him after he had been impaled on a spike. That closed the loop on his arc as the architect of the Upside Down's horrors. But I'm wondering, do you think Joyce was the best choice of person to take Vecna out? I mean, the whole gang was there. Anybody could have done it. I mean, he was impaled. He wasn't going anywhere. He was barely on his last breath. I mean, 11 could have certainly twisted him into a pretzel. Will the Wise now, with all of his power, could have done anything to him. But it was Joyce who had to deliver probably maybe anywhere from 5 to 8 axe chops into his neck before the head came off. What are your thoughts on that? Let me know down in the comments if you think that Joyce was the best choice. And why do you think she was the best choice? I personally think Will was messed with so much by Vecna. I wanted to see it be Will take him out. That would have been my personal choice. Let me know what yours is down in the comments. Now, let's talk about the origin of the Upside Down. Season 5 revealed that the Upside Down is actually just a portal to the Abyss, which was a deeper, more ancient dimension that predated even Hawkins and the Mind Flayer. It's where 11 banished Henry years ago, and where he tried to finally merge the realities. He tried to merge the Abyss with Hawkins. It seems, at least that's what he said he was trying to do, to create one place, I guess, which he never really said what that would be. Also, Will's powers, and then that controversial 30-minute take on his identity. Will finally embraced his connection to the Upside Down. He revealed his latent abilities that helped the group basically navigate Henry's mind. Will could come play spoiler to anything that Vecna was trying to actually do to get to his own endgame. If Will didn't have his powers, Vecna would have won a long time ago. But then we had this coming out story for Will, where he told the group that he was gay. I believe they handled that with grace, and it did show him finally being comfortable in his skin. But I'm just not sure how that played into the story, the main arc, or anything that Vecna was doing at all. Did I miss something? Let me know in the comments if I've totally just been blind to something here. And it's like, oh, no, you didn't hear where they said X, Y, and Z. And if Will hadn't said this, the whole plan would have went south. That's what I was looking for. They played this up with such authority and like, hey, stop everything. The world's ending, but let's all have this kumbaya session right now where I come out to you. I don't know. I'm not trying to belittle that in any way, shape, or form, by the way. I'm just saying this seemed like such a huge thing that came out of left field for no reason. So that's why we talk about these things. I'd love to hear what your opinion is on it. Then you have Hopper and Joyce's future. Well, they're finally getting married. After years of trauma and near death experiences for them and all of their families, their arc ends with peace and love. And maybe, just maybe, a spinoff sequel. We'll see. The actor that plays Hopper's definitely been hinting at that. Then you had Steve, Nancy, Jonathan, and Robin. Their friendships are intact. No dramatic breakups or deaths. Just a sense of earned maturity, mutual respect, and finally, a little bit of normality and peace. But where everything for all these questions that get answered, there's many that aren't. Let's start with, what world was Vecna trying to create? Despite all of his monologues, the show never fully explained what Vecna's vision was of this new world. Was it deconstruction? Was it rebirth? Was it some kind of twisted utopia that he would control? What role was the Mind Flayer playing in all that? We never saw it. He only referred to it once, as far as I could tell. Do you have any thoughts around what you think Vecna was trying to create? Was he just trying to create a hellish world that he would be God Emperor of? Let me know in the comments. Now, I kind of alluded to it earlier, but is 11 alive? The finale ended with ambiguity. After sacrificing herself to prevent future weaponization of her powers, 11 simply faded from sight. Then Mike tells us a story during their final D&D game of a possible getaway and how it's really unclear if it was real or just something Mike envisioned. Now, I fully believe all good shows leave you with these hanging things like this. It lets your imagination take the show more to where you wanted it to be, right? I'm a person who doesn't mind if the main character dies in the end, as long as it makes sense and there was a purpose to it. I've even enjoyed stories, books particularly, where the main character died and the evil person was just as happy and jolly at the end, but it served a greater purpose toward the eventual defeat of the evil person. I'm fine with that. Here, I mean, there's a lot of things that didn't add up. Just a lot of things that didn't add up, and we'll get to those here in a minute. But as far as 11 is concerned, do you think she's still alive? Do you want her to be alive? Hit me up in the comments. Let me know. Okay, where is Kali, or as she was better known as number 8? She returned briefly. She was in another season of the show, and she was not liked by the audience at all. She was known as one of the more quote-unquote hated characters, but she returns briefly in the final battle, but disappears afterward. Her fate and future role remain open. As Mike mentioned, she could still be out there somewhere too. Would you want to see her, or more of her, or figure out what happened to her? I know I would. And also, if you remember when 8 was running by all of those, or maybe it was, I can't remember if it was 8 or if it was, actually, no, I think it was actually 11, was running by all those women that were pregnant, that had been, they had used 8's blood in these to try to create new Vecnas and things. The show hints that others like 11 and Callie may still exist, but it never confirmed their status. What happened to all those people? They never tell us, do they? And then what happened to all the government people that were there? The lady from Terminator, what was she doing? How did she get out of all this? You never even saw her again. I think that was a big ball dropped here in the story. Again, let me know down in the comments what you think. And then finally, is the abyss truly sealed? The portal's closed, but the very nature of the abyss and whether a new one could even be reopened, it's left vague. There's not only just one mind flayer in any world. There could be hundreds, thousands of them. Also, where were all the demagogues and everything? That made no sense. Vecna had no help. If there would have even been 3 demagogues up there, then the whole show would have been completely different. But all of a sudden, no help? You would think that the Mind Flayer would have prepared for that final battle a little bit better than he did. So, I don't know. The final scene that showed Mike narrating that hopeful story about 11 escaping to some quiet cabin in the woods, maybe? I don't know. It's unclear if that's real or if it's just a coping mechanism for Mike. The camera pans to a flickering light, which was a callback to season 1, and then it cut to black. Also, right as 11 disappears, if you watch your screen, I always watch my screen. I don't have the best hearing in the world, so the closed captioning are on, and it says faint heartbeat or something like that. So I think that was telling us she's still alive. I don't know. What are your thoughts? All right. 2 times the show really got me in the finale. The first, I watched every episode of Stranger Things since 2016. And season 5 felt like a culmination of everything that the show had always been. Thrilling, nostalgic, heartbreaking, and sometimes even kind of weirdly spiritual. The first time it hit was when Vecna was killed. I didn't expect to see Joyce swinging that axe, to be honest with you. But I understand, for her, it wasn't just about killing a villain. It was about a mother who'd almost lost everything many times, finally reclaiming her power. The music swelled, the camera lingered on her face, and you felt this wave of catharsis. With each strike of that axe, another child was showing us what Vecna had done to it. And that just, with each swipe of that axe, you're like, yes, he needs to die. It was the kind of moment that reminded me why I loved serialized storytelling like this. The payoff only works because we've walked with these characters for many years and through many different situations. That final head rolling scene, it pays off. And then second, when Elle just fades away. That one hit me kind of hard. Watching Mike reach out for her as she faded. She didn't fade in dramatic explosion. It was just a quiet fading away. Like watching someone ascend, actually. It wasn't just a death scene. It was kind of her surrendering to her own fate. It was a choice she made. And it left me staring at the screen long after the credits rolled, wondering if closure, particularly for Elle, is ever actually possible. Now, I know fan reaction has been divided, but mostly positive, I've got to say. Some fans felt robbed of a bigger final battle. They couldn't believe Vecna had been killed like an hour or so into the show. Maybe, pardon me, a little bit more than that. But others like me praise the emotional depth and the openness of the ending, the ambiguity. As far as critical response goes, Rotten Tomatoes scores it at 89%. Lots and lots and lots of praises for various performances and thematic closure. Netflix reports over 120 million views were had globally in just the first week, making it the most watched finale in its platform history. As I mentioned, it had a very small and weird box office release. You could not buy a ticket for Stranger Things. What you had to do was buy a concession voucher for $20. That got you credit for concessions for $20, and that also got your seat reserved. Not really sure why they did that. Of course, I'm not a big wig in Hollywood. I have no idea. But from what it looks like, it grossed $14.2 million in concession stands, mostly for AMC theaters. So that's got to be a big boon to them. And also, with Netflix hoping to grab up Warner Brothers, maybe we'll see more things like this done in the future. All right. So, at the end of the day, the Stranger Things didn't just give us every answer, like most shows don't. But it did give us something, I think, even better. I think it gave us a story that respects mystery. I think it honors emotion, and it leaves space for personal reflection. To me, those are the best movies, books, stories, TV, you name it. I think when you have room for your own imagination to have some space to breathe within the story, I think those are the better ones. So, with that, let me know what you think about the ending of Stranger Things. I am very positive on it. I'm all in with it. Yeah, there were some weird things. Dustin's speech, I think, was a no-go for me. Didn't make much sense. I mean, the guy had very few friends in the show at all. The one he did have is considered a serial killer within the within the community that he lives in. And out of nowhere, the girl that had turned him down for a date in season 2 is back. I guess they're supposed to show that everything that he had done earned him this kind of respect. And again, there's some things like this that are just there. Look, it's picking at nits at this point. None of that even really matters. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And I would love to see them do more in the future. Let's give this some room to breathe before we move on. So why don't you hit me up down in the comments and let me know about what you think about the ending of Stranger Things. Did you enjoy it from start to finish like I did? Did you have favorite characters? Did you lose any characters along the way? I mean, Eddie, I would have loved to have seen Eddie in the finale. I think that was one character who died a little too early. And the inclusion of Holly at the end to become this major character kind of came out of nowhere. So lots to talk about. Let's talk about it. That's why I created this show. Let's talk about it down in the comments. I'd love to hear what you have to say. So with that, friends, that's going to wrap up another episode here this week of Have I Told You About This? This has been the Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and Stranger Things episode number 10. If you liked the show, and I hope you did, would you please consider simply clicking the like and the subscribe? Again, nothing monetary. Never ask you for any money. All I'm trying to do is get the show out to a wider audience. That's all. And the more people that like and subscribe and comment, the bigger our community can get, and we can begin talking about very cool things. I mean, it would be my absolute dream one day to have meetups with you all and talk about the things that we're going over in the show each and every week. Our shared memory theater, if you will. So friends, with that, I hope you had a wonderful holiday season if you subscribe to said holiday. If it was just time off work for you, I hope you had a great time off work as well. And won't you come on back next week for another episode of Have I Told You About This? Because my mind will certainly have taken me to newer and stranger places. Have a great week, and we'll see you next week right back here.